All right, we're sitting here with Wendy Fournier. She's the president of the National Autism Association. Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay.
And what it is that you're presenting here at the Autism One Generation Rescue Conference.
Okay, well, I am a mom of 3 children, actually. My youngest is Allie, my daughter. She's now 11 years old, severely affected by autism. When Allie was diagnosed at age 2.5, I did like a lot of other parents do, went crazy on the research, trying to find out ways that I could help her. Got online, ended up hooking up with some moms who were part of an organization called Moms on a Mission for Autism. And at the time they were transitioning to turn that organization into the National Autism Association. So I had volunteered to do a little help with web design. Thought I would, give them a few hours, set up a website, and now 8 years later, I'm still doing that. They kind of latched. I couldn't let go. I got totally sucked in.
Wendy's Web, right?
Group of moms. Wendy's Web was my web design company. Yep. So I got involved with N.A.A. From the beginning. We actually started the organization in 2003. And now been the president of the organization for the last 5 years. And I'm here at Autism One. This time I'm presenting on the wandering issue. N.A.A. has been very focused on safety issues for the last year. And this is sort of something new for us because primarily N.A.A. was focused on biomedical interventions, healing, recovery for children, definitely active on the vaccine issue. All of the parents who founded N.A.A. have vaccine-injured children. And that was actually the reason why this organization was founded, because there wasn't an advocacy organization at the time that could represent us and what we knew had happened to our children.
I remember.
Yes, you do remember. It's been a long road, hasn't it?
Yes.
So recently we got into the wandering issue because several of us had personal experiences of our kids eloping, getting into very dangerous situations.
Yes,
and we started hearing news stories going back a few years now. Back to the first one that really stuck with us was a little boy. His name was Logan Mitchelltree. He was from Pennsylvania. And Logan had eloped right out the front door. Family was home. He went outside. It was the middle of the winter, and no one happened to see him walk out the door. So Logan went into the woods that were near his home. He was not dressed for the elements. The family had called the police. Major search with hundreds of volunteers was undertaken, and Logan wasn't found for 3 days. When they finally did find Logan, he was literally frozen in the woods when they found him. So Logan's story really touched us very, very deeply. And stemming from that, it became, more and more important to us, higher and higher on our radar as we started hearing additional stories and had experiences of our own with our children. And in 2008, we were able to start a program called Found. And this program provides funding for law enforcement agencies to get locating equipment for individuals who are at risk of wandering. So we started by funding Project Lifesaver equipment. Project Lifesaver is a nonprofit organization that has equipment that is based on radio frequencies. Your local first responder has equipment and they are trained on how to use it. And a child will wear a wristband that can be either on the wrist or on an ankle. And this wristband emits a unique radio signal once per second. And if your child were to go missing and they had this bracelet on, you would call your local first responders, sheriff's department, police department, fire department, whoever happens to have been trained with this equipment. They have the receiving equipment, they come out and they can locate your child based on that unique radio signal. Okay. So we started providing funding for that in counties and getting wristbands on kids. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of funding for this. And it's actually very frustrating because N.A.A., we work on a really small budget. We are not one of the huge autism organizations that bring in $80 million or whatever. So we're basically working on crumbs and trying to get enough money together to fund county by county to get these kids protected. So there's only so much that we can do as far as putting physical equipment into counties. And it became clear to us that there was a need for even general awareness and basic resources that parents could incorporate into their daily lives, advocacy tools that they could use to make sure that their children were safe, not only at home, but also at school and in other settings. So back in April of last year, 2010, Lori McElwain, who's our co-founder and our board chair, had written a letter to the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee at NIH, it's a mouthful, and basically told them about what we were seeing in the community. All of these wandering incidents. There had been a number of recent cases where children had wandered from a safe environment and were either seriously injured or they were killed. Most of the deaths from wandering are due to drowning, and there's a whole lot of anecdotal evidence out there, and there's a lot of news stories, and there's a lot of stories from parents, sharing their experiences, but there isn't any hard data. So Lori pointed that out in her letter, which was incredibly moving and emotional, and let them know that there is a problem here in this community. Our kids are at risk. They have an impaired sense of danger. They don't understand what can happen to them if they do wander away from adult supervision. And we need to do something about that. So the IACC was very responsive to that letter, and they invited us to come back to their next meeting, which was the following October, to give them a full presentation on the wandering issue. So what we did in the meantime was Lori created a whole series of great materials, printed materials, and website materials. We built a website called AWARE. It's AWAARE.org. And we put all of these resources online for parents. We have information for parents, for teachers, school administrators, first responders, caregivers, just everything that we could think of. Put it on this really nice website, very concise, it's easy to use. Downloadable, printable materials, a family wandering emergency plan, so that you can be prepared in the event that your child does wander. You grab this and all of the information is already on there for you. A first responder alert form, which is really important to contact your local first responders to let them know about your child and let them know that they are at risk of wandering. And if they do elope, what you would want them to do, how you would need them to respond. Go ahead.
Do you also have advice for parents about simple things they can do in their homes? Like, for instance, I added latches high up on the door. Now, for a child who's only 12 and hasn't figured out how to climb to the top of the door and undo the latch, that works. But of course, I know children that would not stop them.
Right.
But what are there home products that could be installed? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
There are, on the website we have a whole bunch of safety resources, and it really depends on the child, how many of those things you may need to incorporate. But the important thing is to never lose your sense of awareness that your child may be able to now get through certain things. So you really can't ever relax. And you might start with hook and eye locks on the top of your doors that are out of the child's reach. But one day, she's going to be able to figure out to grab a chair and unhook and go. So you need to be constantly, vigilant about your safety resources that you incorporate. The more the merrier. We recommend things as simple as the hook and eye latches to deadbolt locks that require keys on both sides if necessary, baby gates to keep your child from leaving their bedroom at night, that kind of thing. Yeah. It really depends on the child. The door knob protection things so that maybe you don't want your child to be able to get into the bathroom. We've had parents who have woken up to their child, overflowing the tub at 3 o'clock in the morning, that kind of stuff.
I've had to lock the sink cabinets under the sink where I keep cleansers.
Yes.
Because I found her, she would get into it and try to put a cleanser squirt bottle in her mouth.
Yeah.
I was like, it's fortunately it was only Windex, but it could have been something much worse.
Right.
And I managed to stop that behavior by making it impossible for her to open those on her own.
It's for a lot of our kids that are lower functioning, it really is like baby-proofing your house. Certain areas that you have to do.
It's difficult to baby-proof a house against a teenager.
It is. It's extremely hard. And then you get into, the things that are a little bit more elaborate, the things that are a little bit more expensive. For example, home security systems, so that an alarm will go off if the window opens or if the door opens. Those are things that involve, monthly fees for monitoring. Fencing can be extremely expensive. But you have to safeguard your house. Some people are, lucky enough to have dogs, service dogs, which is great, if you can afford that. And then, there are some opportunities in local communities where you can get assistance for things like fencing. So we suggest that parents talk to their local church groups or civic groups like the Elks Clubs or Kiwanis or Lions Clubs, Knights of Columbus. Sometimes they can be really helpful with, maybe getting a
like
fence
a
up.
6-foot fence around the yard kind of thing?
Yeah, fence around the yard with a gate.
We've done that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And she hasn't figured out how to open the gate yet.
But she will. So that's why you never, you never have a sense of security.
She's 5 feet tall and she's strong.
Yes.
She could do it, but she just, there's a disconnect where she's mechanically clumsy at this point. But at some point that's going to change, and
It does.
I have to be ready.
You do need to be ready.
Yeah.
What is my next step going to be? You really need to sort of plan ahead.
I bought a GPS device for her that has both GPS and cellular technology built into it. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a strap for her arm, so I will probably switch brands and get one that will,
You
attach
want
to
to
it.
have, if possible, when it comes to the personal locating devices, you really want something that the child can wear and something that the child cannot remove, and preferably something that's waterproof. And, unfortunately, right now where the technology is, we do not have all of the features that we need into one set of technology. So with the Project Lifesaver system that we really prefer that type of a system because it involves law enforcement personnel who are trained on the challenges of searching for kids like ours. So we prefer a law enforcement agency run program, but that's not available everywhere. So then parents can look at things like GPS, personal GPS locators. You want something that your child can wear, preferably. You want something that's waterproof would be great. Unfortunately, that's not available at this time. Geofencing is a really great feature to have in a locating device where you, as a parent, you go online to a website, you can set up a location surrounding your home.
It's a perimeter alert.
Exactly, it's a perimeter alert that you can set up, and many of them you can do several different locations. So you would have a perimeter around your home, you would have one around school, and if your child were to move outside of those perimeters during a certain time of day, you would be notified either via email or text message or a cell phone call that there's a problem. And that's wonderful. I love the geofencing feature. Unfortunately, that is not available on the radio frequency systems that are run by first responders. So we have a piece over here that's fabulous, one over here, and we really need to get those put together.
Now the RF systems tend to be a little bulkier. The tracking equipment that first responders or parents would have tend to be bigger, whereas the cellular / GPS units can be tracked by a smartphone.
Yes.
But there's advantages and disadvantages to each.
Right. Yes, and with the radio frequency, you do have to have the receiving equipment, and yes, it is bulky. However, it pinpoints location, exactly. You can find somebody in a closet. When you're looking at GPS, it's up to the parent to do the searching. There's no involvement, from first responders or any other organized team. It's really up to you to do the search, and it will bring you to the general area where your child may be. But if your child is in a densely brushed area or God forbid, in the water, if the unit isn't waterproof, you're not. It's just not going to work. So that's an issue.
My daughter's school, for instance, I would say that the highest, the most likely period of time where there's a risk of her wandering off or becoming lost would be during recess, or shortly after being brought to school or leaving school. That's when children are more likely to wander off. Transitions, right, exactly. And at my daughter's school, there's very poor GPS signal, and it tends to triangulate her based on cell towers. But I would personally know that I dropped her off in the gymnasium, and her GPS unit would tell me she was across the street at a particular address. Now, unless somebody had abducted her and taken her to that address, but I knew at the time that that wasn't true.
Yeah.
And another thing I didn't like about it was it gives you average mile per hour if she's in a moving vehicle. And I tested it on my own car, and I was going 65 on the highway with my daughter in the back seat, and she was wearing, you know, the GPS. And it reported us at 118 miles per hour.
That would be scary.
Well, I mean, that could lead to a lot of false accusations against bus drivers or something. You know?
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that would concern me as much as...
I think there are concerns with all of the personal tracking technology. You know, Project Lifesaver, I think they're in a sort of a different class of their own because they have been established and around for a very long time. They're a nonprofit organization. And their training program is magnificent for first responders. So I really like that model. But what's happening is that the wandering issue is our children are becoming a money-making commodity. So you're starting to see a lot more technology being introduced that has, you know, is really touting its benefits and why it's better. And, you know, there are a lot of good units, there are a lot of good features of certain units, but it really takes some significant research on the part of a parent to determine which one is the best technology to use for your child, which is going to make you feel safer. And I just want to point out that when you're using one of those GPS or cell-based technology wristbands, that these have to be charged frequently. And this is another drawback that I have with it, is because when that unit is being charged, your child is unprotected. So when do you do that? Do you do it overnight? What if your child gets out, you know, in the middle of the night out of the house and you don't know it? So I don't like that frequent charging thing. So this is another thing that I'm adding to my wish list of technologies.
Yeah, there are trade-offs, and I spoke with one of the tech people at the particular brand that I bought, and he told me that the frequency of reporting that this thing reports its position to the satellite or to the cell towers has a lot to do with battery life. So they found that the default setting of 5-minute reporting will give you a much better idea of the location of your child. Or actually, they didn't develop this for children, they developed for like Alzheimer's, but they're just becoming aware of the autism community now, and they're probably going to change their products a little bit. But they told me that you could set it for a longer period of time, but then what you're getting in battery life, you're sacrificing in safety. A lot can happen in 10 minutes.
Our kids, oh yeah, a whole lot can happen in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And your kid could be dead in 10 minutes.
Yes.
You know, that's what happens. You know, there are a lot of cases of elopement, you know, that ended in tragedy where having a locating device would not have made a difference because the child
Ashley Brock
went,
is one that comes to mind.
Ashley Brock, Daryl Gosine, Mason Medlem. These are kids who it would not have made a difference if they had a device on because they went directly for the water and they drowned. You know, in other cases, tracking devices can definitely save their lives. But you want something that what I fear as more and more of these products come onto the market, I fear that parents are going to be reliant and dependent on the devices and not be as diligent about other ways of preventing wandering incidents. Also, parents, you know, that responsibility is placed on the parents. So if you have a GPS unit that has to be charged every 2 days, what if you forget to do that?
Every 2 days. I rarely got more than 13 hours out of one.
So that's a problem. And so what happens if you forget to do that and your battery is low and that's the day that your child goes missing? So that's where the radio frequency technology I feel is so much better because with that you have it's a watch battery and it lasts for up to 6 weeks. So you change that once a month and you do not have to ever take it off. Once a month you cut the wristband off, the battery is replaced, and then you put it back on. The child cannot remove it, and it never has to come off to bathe or go swimming because those are waterproof. So those are the incredible benefits of that type of technology. I want to see these all married. I mean, I really have this incredible wish list, and I talk to everybody that I can about that because there's so many good things about RF, and then there's so many good things about GPS. But we need to combine those.
A hybrid that is reliable.
Yeah, that really is what we need to see. And then, parents need to know about prevention, and they need to go to aware.org and look at the information that's on there because you want to prevent a wandering incident from even happening. So you need to understand what your child's triggers are. What makes them want to run? Is it a goal-directed incident where they want to run to the lake, or they want to run to the ice cream place down the street? Is it a situation where they're overwhelmed, with sensory input and they need to get away? Are there too many people around? But as a parent, you need to understand what those triggers are, and you need to make sure that the environment that your child in is controlled so that you can try to prevent those incidents from ever even happening. You also have to do this at school. I spent quite a lot of time this year with my daughter's team at school before she even started because she had transitioned into the middle school this year. So a brand new location for her, brand new team of people working for her. And what I did was I went and I visited the school. I looked at the classroom. I looked at the different resources that were available for her to make sure that she was emotionally regulated throughout the day. And I made note of potential dangers in her school environment. And I, went through them one by one. This door has to either be gated or there has to be an alarm on it. The OT room is way too far away. We need something closer in case, she starts to escalate. She needs a place to calm down. Mm-hmm. So parents really need to prepare the school environment as well and make sure that they're not sending their child into a possibly dangerous situation. Also make wandering prevention part of your child's IEP.
That's a good idea.
It's emotional regulation, how to avoid the triggers, what to do in the case of a wandering incident. Demand parental notification immediately because they are not required to tell you that your child wandered. That your child could wander out of the school, down the street, and they would not have to tell you.
I get a phone call if she has a runny nose.
Well, school nurses are different, but when you're talking about a child eloping off the premises, I know of many, many cases where a child has gone off the premises of the school and the parent was not notified, and they found out about it later. So that needs to go into the IEP. One-to-one supervision. Times of confusion are things that we really need to look at. You had mentioned transitions. That's really important. You have a child who is transitioning from recess, to the lunchroom or from speech therapy to their classroom. Lori McElwain had an awful incident that happened not once but twice where her child was left unattended on his own to transition from speech therapy back to his classroom, trying to teach him independence, which was not part of his IEP, and he left. One incident with him, he was actually picked up by a stranger driving down the road, and thank God he was a good man. But the school never notified her of this. This guy who found her son called the police. The police had to track down where this kid belonged, what school he belonged in, and the school had never even contacted the police or the parents. So you want to have protection in your IEP. At the AWARE site, we have a sample letter that you can write to include in your IEP. You want to talk to everybody and tell them about your child. This is what triggers my child. These are the dangers. You need to take this very seriously because my child's life is at risk and you are responsible for her when she's at school. So you talk to them. You need to talk to your neighbors. Neighbors who have swimming pools, especially if your child is attracted to water. Neighbors who need to know, hey, this is my child. Here's a picture. If you see her walking down the street, please get her, bring her to me, or call me, because she should never be unattended out in the neighborhood. And most importantly, you really need to talk to first responders. You have got to talk to your local police, and you need to let them know that your child is at risk of wandering, what locations your child is most likely to go to. In the case of a wandering incident, where you want them to look first. Have a picture on file with them, a description of your child, and the challenges that they may need to be overcoming if they're involved in a search for your child. So, for example, my child does not have good receptive language. My child will not respond if you call her name. My child can't talk, my child is afraid of sirens, anything that you feel is appropriate and will help them to successfully find your child.
This is all good advice that should probably be in a series of safety videos on your website.
Well, we're working on a big, overall safety website. Right now we have the Aware site, which has all of these tips in there, all of this downloadable information, forms that you can fill out, things that you can bring to your police department. So all of the stuff that I'm talking about is basically covered on the Aware site. Okay. But in addition to that, we're also working on other safety issues. So we're bringing in bullying prevention and how to deal with that, especially in a school setting, and restraint and seclusion and abuse.
Could produce an elopement situation,
Yeah, it could. Restraint, fear of restraint. I mean, all of these safety issues really come together. So what we're doing is we're building a website called autismsafety.org. And we're going to be covering, the major safety issues that our kids are facing.
When do you suppose you'll launch that website?
Very, very soon. We were hoping to have it done by this weekend. We're close. Yeah. So I would say in June that will be up.
I understand.
And we do have these lovely brochures for the safety initiatives that we're working on. So we have one on wandering, one on bullying, one on restraint and seclusion. And
nice design. I like the colors.
These Lori McElwain. All of these things will be downloadable from the website, and of course, if you want us to send you some printed copies, we can do that as well.
Great, excellent. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Just share information, and don't be afraid to do that. We've had some reports from parents where their child had gone missing. Some people are actually afraid to call 911. They're afraid that they'll be accused of neglect. And a lot of people do, they're criticized if their child wanders. They don't understand that it only takes a second. And I shared a story today during my presentation about a mom who was a single mom, 3 children. And her daughter with autism was 7 years old. And she was home alone. She had the 3 kids. Her daughter with autism has, these rituals that, she felt like she would always do. So she had requested noodles for lunch, and she liked to watch the noodles cook in the microwave. So while the noodles were cooking in the microwave, she knew her daughter was going to be standing there watching the noodles cook. And the mom went to the bathroom. And when she came back, her kid was gone. So you can never have a sense of security because our kids change. Our kids change, or something happened that got her attention, whatever it was, but she ended up walking out the door and her 2-year-old brother followed her. And, they went to a body of water nearby, a pond. By the time the mother, she raced, she got there, her daughter was face down in the water. Her 2-year-old happened to be wearing a bicycle helmet that actually had him floating in the water. She tried to pull both kids out. She couldn't. A gentleman came and helped and pulled the kids out of the water. Her daughter died. Her son was treated in the hospital and released.
The younger one?
And yeah, the 2-year-old. And this mom was accused of neglectful parenting. There was an investigation accusing her of neglect because she went to the bathroom. And
they have to ask. They have to look into it. I understand that. But they also have to understand that these kids are chaos.
Well, I think what the message needs to be, Eric, is that these are really extreme situations with our kids, and it's not possible for you to have your eyeballs on your child 24/7. I mean, you do have to do things like go to the bathroom, And we need support. As parents, we need support. So this family, they should have had other safeguards made available to them. They were in military housing, okay? They should have had fencing made available to them. They should have had other safeguards to support this family because this was a dangerous situation. So CPS cleared her of that investigation, that she was neglectful. But however, her ex-husband decided he wanted to push it further, so the military actually did an investigation and accused her of neglect. And she was, basically reprimanded and told that if you have to go pee, you need to take all 3 of your children with you because you cannot take your eyes off your children. That's bad parenting. So this is the kind of stuff that we really have to overcome. And we're going to do that by bringing awareness to the issue and trying to get support and resources for families who need them. You know, it's a really sad situation, and we've lost so many kids. And for parents who are grieving, I can't even imagine losing my child, and on top of that, being attacked and accused of being a bad parent. We have to do more to support families that are affected by this, and we have to do more to keep our kids safe.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and we'll get this out and try to help this. We're going to create a video gallery on our site just on the wandering issue.
That would be great.
Because next coming up is we're going to start interviewing some of these vendors.
Good.
And getting them to talk about, what they know and how they're going to, address these issues in their products.
Mm-hmm. And I want you to ask them how we're going to combine all of the best features of these types of technology and get it into one so that we have, the best safeguard that we possibly can. And question number 2, how are we going to make this affordable for families? Yeah. I want this to be affordable. Your kid, regardless of how much money you make, your kid's life, it should be able to be protected if there is technology available there. And I don't like the commodity
Medicare funding, for instance, or something.
Aspect. Well, that's another thing that we're working on is we're trying to get a diagnosis code. We're trying to get a medical diagnosis code for wandering. There is a similar code for dementia-related wandering. So old people get resources and protection from wandering. They get $5 million a year to the Alzheimer's community to help with training, to help with locating devices. But we don't have anything for our kids.
That's a form of precedent, and I think, using that as precedent, we should be able to get our community included.
Right, and if we can get that approved, and that is in process, the CDC actually took our recommendation and they have requested a diagnosis code for our kids, which is, by the way, completely unrelated to an autism diagnosis. It is a separate thing. There's been some debate about that in the community. It is a completely separate diagnosis, but if we can get that to go through, then I'm really hopeful that it will open the door to insurance coverage for personal locating devices so that they will be considered a medically necessary device. And we're going to be reaching out to the autism community on this as these issues move forward, and we're going to be asking everybody to help us with our advocacy efforts, making phone calls, helping us to get legislation. We need money from the Department of Justice, just like they do for Alzheimer's. We need training for first responders. So we're going to be hitting up the community for a lot of help on this, but it's necessary and we need it to save lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.